And we're live. And since we don't turn this one to a podcast, we can start right away. We're back. Thank you, everybody. November was not a month of great health. We need some public service announcements from Dr. Gene on cold and flu season. But we are all back for week 14. Dr. Jene Bramel, Matt Waldman, Sigmund Bloom here. And in some ways, week 14, we all feel the pressure ramp up, especially in our little industry business. But in other ways, if you're in the playoffs, you know how to manage a fantasy football team. You just want a second opinion, an informed opinion. You always get that this morning. Let's go ahead and start, Gene, with breaking injury news. And this one's, okay, so I think it's Ian Rappaport says Will Fuller not expected to play. Our man Pat D. Stat, like a definitive Texans voice, says game time decision. Kiki Cutie might actually get to play today. Gene, is this one of those things that even if Will Fuller's active, is the Ian Rappaport report that he's not expected to play enough to make you back off of him and then maybe, put Kenny Stills into play this week against Denver?
Well, definitely yes to the first. I think it's difficult to say whether or not they use Stills a little bit more than not. I think, it was a pretty definitive report from Rappaport, as you said. There's really not much from the local Texans media, generally speaking. Everything's kind of behind a paywall at the Chronicle, which is not a huge deal, and appropriately so. But Aaron Wilson, he will come out and say things if he's ready to say things. And maybe in hindsight, his tweets earlier this week about both Stills and Fuller and Von Miller being questionable was kind of the note behind the note that we should have seen into a little bit, him equating Fuller on one side with Miller on the other as players who are maybe a little bit more questionable than expected. But I wasn't too concerned. It was still, I keep saying still, Fuller really wasn't on my radar earlier this week because he's been playing through this hamstring injury for a period of time. And even though his targets and reception counts were way down last week, he played the same number of snaps he always did. So you start to wonder then, when you see the practice participation report looking at it in previous weeks, that, maybe this was just the continued maintenance that we've been seeing, and Fuller's injury that he's been dealing with off and on all year hadn't really changed given what we'd seen last week. But now that we hear it described as a lingering injury, iffy status, it really seems like we're getting into a situation where the Texans are looking to get Fuller as ready as possible for the stretch run in the playoffs. And when you hear that, I always feel like it is much more likely at that point, if the team is going to go that direction, that they're going to make him inactive. Why put him out there as a decoy when you've got a similar player as Kenny Stills there? So, and I think that's his likely role. I don't know that we're going to see him looked to on the field if he's not been able to practice much with a hamstring injury. So again, to the first part of the question, I don't feel like you can play Fuller even if he's on the active roster. And then you have to decide, are the Texans a likely team who could put Fuller out there? Given what we heard, I can't remember who tweeted it earlier this week, but there's some indication that, they like putting Fuller on one side of the field to direct the coverage so that it's a little bit easier for the run game. So are they going to use Fuller in that way? Do they trust that teams are going to react to their offense in the same way if Stills is on the field? So this is a situation where you could really see a player be active and be simply used as a decoy. So avoid Fuller for sure. And then I think your Stills decision probably comes down to whether or not Fuller is on the active roster or not.
Okay, Matt, just briefly, I say briefly because I don't think it takes much to answer this, but I just want to hear your answer. Fuller being out, let's assume for this discussion Fuller's out. Fuller being out, does it change your Deshaun Watson decision at all?
A little bit, only because I think that while Stills can be decent for you, I don't think you get that over the top thing. So if you're looking at the difference between a 250, 260 yard day and a 300 yard day, and you have somebody who's more likely to give you a 300 yard day, then yeah.
Well, I mean, so let's get the rubber meets the road. Like, I'll give you some quick thumbs up, thumbs down. And I understand that, none of these are definitive. And again, trust your gut, folks. Don't listen to us. If you had Aaron Rodgers against Washington or Deshaun Watson today,
I would probably say Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, see, I mean, we're in the same spot here. Like Russell Wilson tonight against the Rams or Deshaun Watson.
Russell Wilson.
Okay, so you're high on Wilson. So we another 30-29 kind of game, a higher scoring game. But these are the quarterbacks. I mean, otherwise, then you're talking like you're not going to get cute and play like Ryan Fitzpatrick over him or Matt Ryan or even Jared Goff in that matchup. I don't think so. I mean, I think Watson's a ride or die kind of player. Now, I went in, Matt, and did what you should never do and make one of these adjustments. I put Kenny Stills in over Christian Kirk. This is assuming, and this touches on Pittsburgh and Arizona to an extent, and this is me being selfish. But is it getting too cute to consider Kenny Stills if Watson's out? My thinking here is Chris Harris on DeAndre Hopkins. I've been listening to Cecil too much because every week it's like, well, who is the other receiver? Like it was Cole Beasley, you know? I mean, these are matchups that are good matchups. Mike Williams had 5 for 117 last week. I like the second receiver against Denver. Am I getting too cute going with Stills over Kirk, or are folks getting too cute if they're all of a sudden considering Stills this morning?
No, because if you look at the game logs of wide receivers against Denver, they tend to be bothered by speedy receivers who run pretty good routes. So it's not just Mike Williams last week. You actually look at guys like John Brown with the touchdown he had, Stephon Diggs with the touchdown he had, Odell Beckham had an 87-yard day, T.Y. Hilton, Tyreek Hill. You can go down the list of D.D. Westbrook, 5 for 66. Marquez Valdes-Scantling had one of his lone good days, 6 for 99 and a touchdown. So to me, Tyrell Williams, anyone who can get some separation and has a little bit of skill after the catch is worth a look if you're looking at your third or fourth wide receiver and think that Stills can be a good substitute for that.
Gene, did you go to Christmas parades when you were a kid?
No.
Do they have any Christmas parades? Like you're near Springfield, right?
That's where I was. Yeah.
Okay.
Not when I was a young one though. That's
right.
Where we are
right.
now.
Matt, did you go to Christmas parades when you were a kid?
I went to Chinese restaurants on Christmas.
We just didn't do much in the way of parades, period. I guess I shouldn't be knocking Christmas parades. I'm sure there was a thing, but it wasn't something that our family did.
In New Orleans, though.
Although you're making me think of A Christmas Story. That's what you're
making. Right. See, there's a Christmas parade. I think A Christmas
Cleveland.
Story is the definitive Christmas movie, honestly. I was just defending A Christmas Story to Kate the other day. So we went to the Crew of Jingle. That's the Christmas parade here in New Orleans. And then actually checked out Crew of Krampus. Y'all know Krampus, right?
Mm-hmm.
Krampus is going to steal. And it's great, actually. Crew Krampus is great because they get real pagan. And they actually come and like the crowd, the kids in the crowd, and like, I'm going to take you to the coal mine. Oh, the parents play along. They have a little pen they pull along with children, like actual live children, and like, oh, free us, And it Crew of Krampus, they give out coal. Because in New Orleans, you have a parade, you got to give stuff out. Dalvin Cook, Gene.
I don't care about Dalvin Cook. Why are we defending Christmas Story? What, Kate has an issue with the Christmas Story?
No, it's just a generational kind of thing, right? Because I think that Christmas Story was like definitive if you're above a certain age, and if you're a little bit younger, then it's like Elf or some movie from the 90s. Anyway,
I don't have a problem with Elf. I'm just trying to figure out why. I don't think Christmas Story is generational in the same way that I don't think The Grinch or Rudolph is generational. Everybody should love Yukon Cornelius and The Grinch.
Yes. I just noticed that Ray Harryhausen had a cameo in Elf. We were watching Elf yesterday. Ray, from the didn't he do Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and all that stuff? Anyway, Gene, is Dalvin Cook a lump of coal or is he a delicious candy cane?
All right. So Dalvin Cook is interesting to me this week for lots of reasons. One, I no longer put much stock in anything Minnesota puts on the injury report or that Mike Zimmer says, and that's fine. That's fine. And we wouldn't have in the past anyway, because Mike Zimmer is not necessarily straightforward. But the way that some of the reports on Adam Thielen and Dalvin Cook are coming out, I'm not saying that it's intentionally misleading necessarily, but some of the more positive things that you'd say were more specifically positive in ways that you would have thought that they were optimistic, or at least I would have. So when Mike Zimmer says, I think Dalvin Cook is going to be close to 100% and they've taken him off the injury report altogether, that doesn't make a ton of sense to me, because there's really no reason 6 days after him taking a couple of very painful hits and not being able to leave the field without trainers or get back into the game in an important situation that he should be considered any more healthy today than he was going into that Monday night game. So what does that mean? So this is not a conditioning issue. It's not a reconditioning soft tissue injury. It is a joint that's affected, meaning that we're not really worried about a decreasing snap count. It is an injury that he can play with until it's aggravated. So is it going to be aggravated? Could he get 20 carries and 25 touches before he gets taken to the ground or hit on that shoulder in such a way that he needs to leave the game? Yes, it's possible. And ordinarily, I would say when you've got a backup like Alexander Madison there, who's proven, he's not Dalvin Cook, but he is extremely capable. This isn't trying to find, the fourth or fifth running back off the street to go in there, by which you really don't have another great option, and you're going to ride Dalvin Cook as much as you can. Ordinarily, you would say Madison could come in, they'd give him every other series instead of every third or fourth series or something like that. But because of this specific type of injury, you don't necessarily need to do that. So I kind of rewrote my blurb on Cook yesterday multiple different ways, because it just, there's so many different ways that you could take this based on what Minnesota is saying, based on Cook's injury itself, based on Madison's ability to come in and be productive. But I think it is very reasonable to assume that Minnesota will come into this game ready to use Cook as they normally would. And then after that, it's a roll of the dice as far as, is somebody going to hit him in such a way? Is he going to hit the ground in such a way that he's going to have to come out of the game for multiple snaps or series? Or is there something that happens early in the game where he said, yeah, I thought the injection and whatever I could do with padding, which is a very difficult thing to do with this part of with an injury in this area, was going to be okay, but I just don't feel right. And all of a sudden it becomes, yes, we were planning to use him for 75% of the snaps and then not. So I think if you've got Cook, unless you've got another obvious 12 to 15 touch option behind an offensive line that you think can get multiple touches and red zone carries and all those sorts of things, that I think you can trust Cook. But he absolutely has a much lower floor than you would ordinarily expect a player who is not on the injury report says he's 100% and the coach says he's 100% to have. So I feel like you roll with him if you got him, but I don't know that he's got the same top 5 expectation that he would have in any other week.
Okay.
Is that helpful? I don't know if that's helpful or not. But.
No, look, it's again, week 14, you made it to the playoffs. Trust your gut. But I'll say this, and Tom Kasenik put out a tweet this morning that really summed up my feelings to the extent of, if you have Dalvin Cook, you're playing Dalvin Cook. I mean, what happens. I mean, he's not on the injury report, although, as Gene said, the Vikings are maybe playing some games there. He's insisted every single day since Wednesday that he's going to play. So let's make the math simple first, Matt.
Which would be fine, except he didn't on Monday night, right?
Yeah, right.
Same situation. He can insist, like I said, he can insist all he wants. It's very possible that he makes it through a 50 snap, 22 touch game today with 2 touchdowns and over 100 yards total. But this is legitimately today. I feel like it's despite what's being said, it is a snap-to-snap situation.
Yeah, it's a precarious situation. Gene, I compared it to like the player playing with 5 fouls. I always think of college basketball when I say 4 fouls. I watch college more than NBA. That's how I look at Cook.
And he's not necessarily in control in the same way that player is not in control of where things happen around him in the lane and what a referee may or may not call. Dalvin Cook is not in control of how he takes a hit today.
There you go. You can use that analogy. I won't charge it, Gene. Okay. Matt Waldman, and I know that you may not be the best person to ask this, or you may have a little bit, Alexander Madison, you were trucking with him long before Rick Spielman got the idea of trading down 3 times in the 3rd round to get him. But let's start with the simplest math first, Matt. If you have Cook or Madison, which one are you playing? If you can only play one of them.
I'm gonna actually plead the fifth on this one, and I've never really done that, but I'm gonna say it like this. Don't listen to Bloom or Tom if you are one of the more controlling types of people in terms of how you like to do stuff, and you're going to blame someone else for the for the mistake that you decided to make because you were confused about this. Trust your gut with this. It doesn't matter. Like Bloom said, that's the one thing I would listen to, what any of us say with this, because you're basically playing roulette with this particular situation. Me personally, I mean, I'd probably play Cook and know that if it doesn't work out, then I'll play Cook, But it's one of those situations where if you're just looking for someone to tell you what to do, then yeah, if you want someone else to tell you what to do, then go with Cook. But, at the same time, to me, the way Gene outlines this doesn't sound very good. I mean, honestly, there's a part of me that if I had like 3 teams with Cook and I had Madison or Cook, I might take Madison twice and Cook once, depending on what my situation is.
And Madison's that safe, at least 10 to 12 touches. And if you like Minnesota to get out ahead of David Blau in Detroit, then you like Madison even more. Because once the game is like 2 scores, I would imagine they're going to pull Cook.
And Sauer, you got to boo louder for me to hear you.
Boo.
Yay. All right, there we go.
They're not saying boo. They're saying buy the RSP. Pre-order today.
They're saying boo.
Okay, so real quickly while we're on this game, and again, I say briefly, we could go 2 or 3 hours today because it feels like everything's under the microscope. I say briefly when I say Stephon Diggs and Gene, Adam Thielen, scar tissue. What? Huh? Where did this come from?
When you have an injury, your body scars to heal. So this happens all the time. I actually feel a little bit better about Thielen after this, honestly, because, you wondered, he tried to come back 2 weeks later, found out quickly he couldn't go. Took another 3 weeks off, came out of the bye week, didn't feel great. And then we heard after he was inactive last week that he had a scare on Tuesday, and then they allowed him to do some limited practice. So you wonder if, yes, he was just working through some scar tissue issues last week. The scare was that they thought he aggravated the injury and have now decided that he didn't, but wanted to continue to rehab him this week. But again, I don't trust anything that's coming out of Minnesota right now. Thielen has said he's not going to play until he's 100%. So we're not going to have any information on this until Wednesday. If Thielen is not practicing on Wednesday, we got a big problem. If he's doing a little bit more on Wednesday, then I think there's a chance. And the report this morning was that they were optimistic he's going to play. But again, Tuesday, Wednesday's practice is what it's going to be for Thielen.
Okay, so Matt, I think Stephon Diggs, I mean, if you have Diggs among your choices, unless you only start 2 wide receivers, you're playing Diggs today against Detroit. Yeah?
No doubt.
What about Kenny Golladay and to a lesser extent Marvin Jones? I think we can all agree Golladay over Jones. Well, I mean, Minnesota's pass defense has been vulnerable, but you're still relying. And sometimes, this is that thing where like your intellect is going to work against you when you make the wrong choice today, right? Because if Kenny Golladay has 2 for 29, you're like, why did I rely on a third string quarterback? Even when what do we do about Golladay and Marvin Jones today?
See, Marvin Jones scored 4 touchdowns last time against Xavier Rhodes and Minnesota, and Golladay averages 20 yards a catch, but doesn't have many catches, even though he's slightly higher up the rankings. And I have a young quarterback. Who would I rather have? The young quarterback who has a quarterback-friendly receiver who can run every route and win contested catches, or the guy who can just win contested catches and run fast and does it really well? I'd rather take Marvin Jones. I mean, you're asking the wrong guy all the time when you ask me about Marvin Jones. But that's the logic behind it for me is I'd rather take the technician who's a quarterback-friendly receiver to a young quarterback than a guy who you have to show rapport with, or he has to go wide open on a team that has, some pretty good cornerbacks. Even if Xavier Rhodes hasn't been good this year, he's still a good cornerback in the NFL. Yeah. I mean, it could change, he might either be playing hurt, which we don't know about because, as Gene so well outlined that he doesn't trust Mike Zimmer about anything. And, my theory that, the reason that everybody was mad at each other is that Kirk Cousins probably took a chair to Adam Thielen's leg in some sort of argument and said, "How do you like me now?" Or whatever.
You like that?
You like that? Yeah. So, but seriously, I think that in this situation, if you have Kenny Golladay, you probably continue to roll with him just because of the hope that he's been playing well enough to get open and make those plays. But he's been a boom bust player. He's going to continue to be a boom bust player. And Marvin Jones is a more quarterback friendly receiver. So I would probably still roll with him.
Gee, what kind of illness does Le'Veon Bell have to get ruled out on Saturday?
Probably something flu-like, and stomach flu is different than true influenza, but you just wonder if it's a 3 or 4 day situation, you're still having fevers, it's probably influenza, but it's, hard to know. Could definitely be something more than that. Hopefully not.
Jeez.
So again, Matt, this is funny. This is like, we're doing Matt Waldman. This is your life. Cause now we're going to talk about Bilal Powell.
All right.
I mean, again, and this is me, and we always have the disclaimer. Like, I wish I could put a disclaimer in red that says, trust your gut in the playoffs. Don't listen to us. But, and I want to add to my business cards, Matt, fantasy football scapegoat, because if you do want a scapegoat, I'm here for you. And I'll give you something definitive. Boo. Yeah. I'm tending to not trust Bilal Powell today. I'm tending not to trust Bilal Powell because the Jets running game hasn't been great, even with Le'Veon Bell. okay, Miami's a good matchup, but matchup is so you get the question, like, do you change your strategy? Do you change your process during the playoffs? I do tend to downplay matchup with a few exceptions, in the sense that I'm not going to talk myself into playing someone that otherwise I wouldn't because of matchup, right? So I'm not going to factor Miami in too much here. Also, the Jets are just dragging ass into this game. I don't know what Adam Gase is going to do with Ty Montgomery. I don't know what he's going to do with Josh Adams. I don't even want to dip my toe into this situation. But then again, it's Bilal Powell, and he does this almost every year. 20 carries for 100 yards and a touchdown. Shouldn't surprise anybody. You've been, again, before it was ever cool to like Bilal Powell, you have been a fan of his game, but this is late career Bilal Powell. It's the Adam Gase Jets. Do you want to give folks confidence to play him, or do you want to join me over in the, hey, maybe have a little, don't talk yourself into playing someone in week 14 that you haven't played all year?
I think that you have to look at it this way, that when it comes to matchups, to me, it's a little bit more complicated in the process of just going, oh, they have a good matchup. Oh, or they have a bad matchup. You should look at matchups critically and look at it and see what type of backs go off against those types of defenses and what types of rushing teams go off against those types of defenses. I mean, and when you look at, and part of that is, how good is that offensive line? Well, we have this guy named Matt Batanti at Football Guys who does a pretty darn good job of being able to rate the offensive lines and tell you what's going on with them as a unit. And, 4 of the 5 starters, as he wrote this week, were flagged with penalties. And, this was a cohesion downgrade for them. And so to me, you look at that situation and I would say you're probably not going to trust him. I mean, I think that it's probably, a back is usually only as good as his offensive line. So, and it's usually the reason why people are always too early to downgrade backs who they think have somehow magically slowed down when it's really because the defensive line is like 2 inches from them as they take the handoff on, 60% of their carries. So, Bilal Powell has a fighting chance. If you're desperate, right? Yeah, you're gonna go on the blind date with Bilal Powell, as our listener just commented on there. But if you're not in a blind date situation, then why would you do that? It's like the dumbass who's out on a date and sees someone who looks pretty to them and decides to ditch his date at the movie theater. You don't deserve to go out on dates at all.
Yeah, Stephen Pavey, I like that analogy, man. Like spending money on a blind date, And we could get a little cruder. It is, Sunday morning though. We'll try to keep this a family show. Real quick, Matt. Real quick, I know, right? Real quick, Matt. Just let your mind go wherever it went. Real quick, because this is the Jets in Miami, right? And I always talk about how when we get to games where there's nothing on the line in terms of playoffs, sometimes you get bad defensive football, which is great for fantasy. Sometimes you just get bad football. So, and you can get nuanced and pick and choose some. But if we're talking about Ryan Fitzpatrick, I'll give my take first. I got Ryan Fitzpatrick around like quarterback 9 or 10 this week. I mean, if it's Ryan Fitzpatrick and it's not an obvious, I'm telling a lot of people, yeah, Fitzpatrick, it's fun. It's Miami. They already beat against the Jets. They beat the Jets already. They're surging. 5 touchdowns on 5 straight drives last week against Philly. Likewise, Robbie Anderson, I think they put a little stress on him in the game plan early, and Miami's corners are terrible. I'm okay with Robbie Anderson coming into 2 straight good weeks. I'm a little less excited about Darnold. Little less. I do like, and also like Mike Gesicki. Mike Gesicki had 6 for 95 or something like that in the first matchup here, and that's just clicking right now. I think that combination is clicking, and Jamal Adams is out. That's sad. But what's your general feeling, Matt, about going to this game for players in your Week 14 DFS lineups and your playoff lineups?
Guys that in your playoff lineups, go with the guys that who've played well and just stick with them. In DFS, you can take more chances and you can try and play around a little bit with lesser priced players who might be doing you good. So the guys that you don't need to take chances on, they're just guys that you can send them in there and know they've had a track record. Are Gesicki, they are Devontae Parker, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Robbie Anderson. But I would take a chance on Bilal Powell in a DFS situation because the price may be low enough that it's worthwhile. I might take a chance on, Jamison Crowder over the middle, just because he might substitute as a tight end, and Miami's Jerome Baker, it seems to be just as confused as, the former Oregon linebacker who's played with like 5 different teams now and is with the Saints, who also can't seem to cover pretty well, tight ends pretty well in the red zone. Miami seems to have communication issues on that front, and their secondary is, banged up. So, communicating with safeties and cornerbacks on who to take in that compressed area can be confounding. So, that's a guy that I might take a shot on. In addition to that, Patrick Laird.
There you go.
Everyone likes talking about Patrick Laird, and I feel like what they're doing there is that they saw. I don't know. That's one of those trendy picks where people, saw the usage pattern and haven't really watched Patrick Laird. Patrick Laird can catch a football. He can operate in space, but I'm not trusting Patrick Laird.
Yeah, well, a PPR league, you maybe get a little bit of a nudge, but yeah, and to judge on defensive stuff,
He ran 30. He got 35% of the snap rate. Yeah, and he didn't get
4 yards.
He didn't get Jack Corn on.
And this is to help Sean. Sean was with us. I see Sean sometimes as the first person in the chat room. So he says, "Would you start Powell over guys?" I say no, and Matt Waldman is vigorously shaking his head no. Whoops, Barkley runner.
Ingram.
All right. Right? You haven't got to Barkley. Yeah, I know, right? The Giants. Eli's back. Eli's back, Gene. You get Eli. This is your present. That's what's in your stocking for week 14. But I'm not going to talk about that.
Did you light it on fire and set it outside the door?
Right, exactly. It's a joke. It's a joke. That's all.
I'm going to the parade.
Is for Halloween. Yeah, right. Gene, what is a shoulder plate? And how is Josh Jacobs playing with a broken one?
Yeah, I don't know. So the only shoulder injury that makes sense here when you talk about a fracture is kind of a hairline situation in your shoulder blade. So I don't know that a shoulder plate is a thing.
Yeah.
There's multiple different kind of projections where your shoulder blade and collarbone come together back there. It could be a little bit lower than that too, but a lot of times these things are described as pain tolerance injuries, and guys play through things that are tough. My expectation here is that Jacobs is going to be inactive today, because generally you hear more details about an injury like this, very precise details in one of two situations. One, a player's been out for multiple weeks, knows he's coming back, he's finally healthy, and now they're willing to talk about exactly what was going on where they may not have been before, because it would have given teams, media, us an idea that they definitely wouldn't have been playing, or wouldn't have been playing as effectively as they could have otherwise. So that's one situation. And the other situation is, a guy's been battling through something for weeks and weeks and weeks. Will Fuller, this happens so often and then, in anticipation of a player not playing, the details are released. And sometimes it doesn't happen until Sunday morning. It was a little bit interesting that Jacobs himself was the breaking news reporter in this when this happened. So I think, and then John Gruden basically said that they weren't sure he's going to be able to go. The local media is a lot less rosy picture about Jacobs playing through this, saying he barely practiced at all. So I'll be surprised if he's active. This situation where the Raiders probably don't have, they definitely don't have an Alexander Madison there, and they're still in the playoff hunt. So they'd like to have him. So, the hope is, are we going to allow him to continue to struggle through this with the number of carries that we have to give him because we don't have a backup on the plan? Or do we give him a week or two off to rest and rehab and hope that he's able to finish off the rest of the season if we do that? So I'll be surprised if he's active today, but it's an injury that he's played through already. So it's possible that he does. And if he does, the expectation would be that they use him in the way that they usually had. Looking back at his recent game logs, the last couple of weeks have been kind of a clear downward trend, but the Raiders have been blown out in both of those games. So it's hard to know whether or not something was injury related and maintenance and workload related, or if it was a sign that he wasn't likely to play that much anyway. So I expect him to be inactive and hopefully back next week doing what he'd been doing previously.
Yeah, it was against Green Bay, I think, when he jogged up the tunnel and then he was back out there and playing. I think that's probably when he suffered the injury. But the tone about it has changed greatly over this last week compared to previous weeks. So hopefully, as Gene said, he's inactive and it resolves it for you. But a la Will Fuller, even if he's active, Tennessee's run defense is tough. And Oakland's playing like doo-doo. So, Matt, on this game, on this Oakland. Another thing might be too, if Oakland loses today and they fall 2 games out of the wild card hunt with 3 left. I mean, don't Cadillac this guy, Gruden. I mean, I know it sounded great for fantasy to turn him into Cadillac Williams for a year, but please don't ruin him, okay? Matt, Ryan Tannehill, and this is kind of like Russell Wilson light, because Russell Wilson, you might only get 20 or 25 attempts. You just keep playing him. Has Ryan Tannehill earned that kind of aura where, if this game gets out of hand, it is out in Oakland, and hey, the home fans, only a few more riots, it makes me sad. But can you trust Ryan Tannehill? Like, if you had Ryan Tannehill or Sam Darnold or Ryan Tannehill or Matt Ryan or, Ryan Tannehill and some of these other quarterbacks this week that you're like, Ryan Tannehill or Jared Goff, is Tannehill generally a warm or cool option for you today?
No, he's a warm option for sure. I mean, I think that you have to count on him because, one, they're playing well. He has a good connection with A.J. Brown. He's someone who's firing the ball down the field. He's playing a little smarter than what we saw from him in Miami in the pocket. And he has this team. I mean, he has gained the trust of this team, and he's playing pretty darn good football. And over the past 7 or 8 weeks, he's been the number 2 quarterback in fantasy football.
Right.
So why are you going to say warm or cool with him? It's either warm or hot with this guy. You have to look at it that way, because if we're going to go by Sigmund Bloom's rule of you play in the now, and it's what's happening now, not what happened before. Well, what's happening now is there another quarterback other than Lamar Jackson that you would pick, based on rankings? And the Raiders, I mean, the Raiders defense is not all that great, in terms of Max Crosby will get you some pressure, and you'll get a little bit of pressure from this team. But, over the middle of the field, they're still not very good. And guess who runs through the middle of the field like a hot knife through butter?
Brown,
Yeah, exactly.
I was going to say, this is all leading to Matt Waldman. Look, I'm saying you should really click the check mark beside A.J. Brown today. He might only have 3 catches, just like Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill might only throw the ball 17 times. A.J. Brown might only have 3 for 44. But A.J. Brown also might have 3 for 102 touchdowns.
Ryan Tannehill is also a very good runner because he runs like the slot receiver he was at Texas A&M.
Yeah, honorable mention, all Big 12 honorable mention. So next we get to, Gene, I'm not really sure how to set this up so we can rely on your insight, but I'm getting so many questions about Tyler Lockett, right? There's one layer to this. If he said he had the flu and he was miserable last week, how much should we factor that into discounting last week? And then there's that gnarly injury he had that landed him in the hospital for a couple of days. Is this one of those situations where, he's playing, he's on the injury report, but you're a fool if you think that's not affecting him and isn't part of the reason he's been so disappointing, which means you're a fool if you keep playing him? What can you give to help us on our Tyler Lockett decisions tonight?
I think I'd play him. I think we got enough information about that shin injury to suspect that once he was released from the hospital, it was a day-by-day, week-by-week situation for him to recover. I have not seen anything that specifically makes me think that the leg is hindering him. Certainly leg recovery and then building back conditioning and getting the flu immediately afterward could be enough to take stuff out of anybody, and he missed a couple of days worth of practice. So I feel pretty good about him. We know he's a vital part of the Seattle offense, and if he is healthy enough to play and he's been off the injury report, a lot of times Pete Carroll and the Seahawks will just give players plenty of time off. Dwayne Brown hasn't practiced in weeks, and sometimes isn't on the injury report at all. So for him not to be on the injury report at all this week, they've given him plenty of time to recover. If he's not productive this week, then I think you have a really hard time making a decision in week 15 and 16 and beyond. But I think there's been enough going on that I think you give him the benefit of the doubt. He's been too good at other times this year. And it's not like, DK Metcalf, David Moore, Chris Carson. Those are nice players, but neither one of those is necessarily somebody that you would expect the team to totally change the offense for Tyler Lockett maybe not being the same player he was earlier in the season too. So I'm motivated positively by him not being on the injury report this week, and I would expect him to bounce back.
Matt, are you also saying, come on in? It's like the horror movie, right? It's the axe murderer in the cabin, or Tyler Lockett find a room full of treasure for your fantasy team this week.
Well, we know Bloom doesn't like Seattle, so it's going to be painted as a horror story with Russell Wilson and his bland personality, being the ultimate horror.
You saw that was like a story. He was so boring when he was mic'd up.
Yeah, well, we can get into that again, like we did
Thursday
Thursday
night
night,
topic,
but we
yeah.
don't need to. Yeah, you start Tyler Lockett. I agree with Gene in this particular situation.
Pick one.
Give him the benefit of the doubt.
Pick one, Carson or Penny.
Carson, because they still trust him. I mean, the dude leads the league in fumbles, and they're still going back to him. So I don't think it's going to end now. I think if it's going to end at all, it's going to be an ignominious end in the playoffs where he fumbles the ball away and they lose a game that they should have won.
I love that you used ignominious there. And I'm actually coming around to this, which kind of scares me. I actually think you're going to see Todd Gurley, not in the passing game, but in the running game. I think that with the Rams basically every week is kind of a mini playoff game, and what Sean McVay said, I think this is a Todd Gurley week. And I know that you're probably likely to join me. Are you going to join me, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, Sean McVay, when they asked him why he's using him more, he said, because I was an idiot before, basically. I mean, I'm starting to like this coach. I mean, I'm starting to like the fact that he'll sit there and go, yeah, the biggest reason I was just an idiot about being too conservative with using him. And I think that now, they get one of their players back and they go from there, and, that works. And do we have a vocabulary? Do we have a vocabulary minimum for
50-cent words?
For,
4 syllables.
For some of our folks,
I like
before
that.
they can listen to the show, or do
It's
they
funny.
or we just make them look it up?
I think that we're always on a quest of learning in life. Life is an open book thing.
I like that he's looking it up.
Yeah, it is good. And so listen, folks, I've learned a lot of words over the years because I did spend a lot of time in school. I wish I could have been a professional student. Yeah, right. All the Latin race. I should use race ipsa loquitur for some sort of fancy decision. Like someone should say, should I start this player? And I say race ipsa loquitur. Like that's your only clue. But even I'm with y'all out there sometimes where my brain will tell me use this word. And I'll say, really, brain? I don't know what that word means. My brain says, just use it. So, I really.
I want to beat the man in your brain who says that. Like, what's he dressed like,
Oh, yeah. He's dressed like Tom Waits as Renfield and Dracula or something. All right. So, we move on, Gene. Odell Beckham's been playing with a hernia. Why didn't you tell us this weeks ago, Gene?
So you should assume when a player is on the injury report with a groin, hip, or belly, abdomen injury for weeks and weeks and weeks, limited or otherwise, that he's got a sports hernia or core muscle situation. And there are hundreds of combinations of those. Some of them are a little bit easier, not to say that any of them are easy, but some of them are better able to be played through than others without surgery. And it happens every year where we hear that players have been playing through these things, and then Adrian Peterson did it, Marvin Jones did it. We've seen it over and over again. And then they choose to have surgery pretty soon after the season's over because they don't want to take the chance that a 4 to 6 week surgical situation becomes a little bit longer if they feel like they can manage it adequately. And I think it's difficult to say whether or not Beckham's injury is the issue, whether or not the Browns offense is the issue, whether or not Baker Mayfield is the issue. All of those things are all together, right? So I suppose Beckham is a high enough profile player where we probably should have discussed it before. And it is notable that the last 3 weeks he's been limited in practice rather than listed full in practice, but he has been on the injury report with this since week 1. I think. So those things are always sports hernia, core abdominal muscle injuries until proven otherwise. And lots of players are doing the same thing Beckham is right now without being on the injury report. Again, that is no shade towards Beckham, and I'm not saying this is an easy thing to play through, but it's not something that should necessarily be surprising to us. And as long as the player tries to continue to play through it, you hope that they're able to do so successfully. I think there's a slim chance that if the Browns fall any further out of the playoff race, that we may see Beckham shut it down week 16 or 17. If he doesn't need to play, he may as well get a head start on rehabbing and surgical procedures and things like that. So it's kind of a week-to-week situation at this point. That wasn't the only news report on Beckham this week. There were other articles earlier in the season. You kind of get the sense that with the season maybe slipping away from Cleveland, that Beckham is starting to talk a little bit more. And although his name isn't necessarily on some of these reports and he denies them later, there's certainly a kernel of truth to all of this. So not too much surprise to me. I wouldn't downgrade him any more than you already would based on this news. This is not a new situation for him. It's unlikely to have been aggravated. If it was aggravated 3 weeks ago when they started marking him limited on the injury report. So Is what it is
Okay.
with Beckham right now.
Okay, Matt. So again, kind of like living in the now, right? I mean, I know he almost had a touchdown against the Steelers. I know he had a touchdown against, I think it was Miami. Everyone gets right against Miami, like in the passing game. That's why you play Robbie Anderson today. But now when you look at Odell Beckham's numbers, I mean, some of it is, well, Cleveland's offense. There was a story, I think Mary Kay Cabot put out a story this week, Matt. I don't know if you saw it. Like the game plan is like a committee. Like Kitchens goes to Munkin. Munkin calls his weekly Thursday press conference about the offense his dental appointment. So that tells you how good of a time Todd Munkin is having. But he said that the quarterback coach, Lindley, gets input. Even maybe Drew Stanton gets input. Now you're just making fun of Kitchens. Too many chefs in the kitchens. So we already knew that Cleveland wasn't optimizing the usage of Mayfield or Beckham. And that was the story we told ourselves about, well, Beckham's underperforming. But now we have an actual physical reason that he's underperforming. And watching him on the deep balls against the Steelers, you just see there's no acceleration, there's no extra gear. And then we can get into all the usage. Bottom line, does this mean like I've been wanting to bench Odell Beckham for weeks and I haven't done it because it's Odell Beckham? Now, does this give you permission to bench Odell Beckham this week?
Yeah, if you need permission, then yes, I think that makes sense, especially if you want to, unless you're one of those Baker Mayfield truthers who said, well, it's because Odell's injury is why he couldn't bend back behind the break point, be able to catch a lot of the throws that Baker Mayfield, delivers late, and isn't accurate, as this percentages may have indicated at Oklahoma. So, I mean, I think it's one of those deals where, can he play on it? Yes, he can. Is Cleveland the optimal offense for him to actually succeed? No, because Baker Mayfield doesn't deliver passes to him on a silver platter the way a lot of other quarterbacks might. And part of it is because maybe the game plan is fresh out of the kitchen and he's looking at the plate and going, what's this, Freddie? What's this, Brian? What's this, Stanton, and and it may be one of those deals where this team is not fluent with its game plan on the level that it should be. And there's a lot of overthinking going on at the quarterback position as a result of that.
If you're going to ask Drew Stanton's input, you might as well ask Matt Waldman's input. Okay. I know he would pick up the phone if you called. And how cute do we get, Matt? I mean, so you're going to say yes, AJ Brown over Odell Beckham today, if that's the choice.
Yeah, probably. I would.
I can tell what the brief said, like Robbie Anderson over Odell Beckham.
Yeah.
What about like Kenny Stills getting too cute, or now we to the point where like, come on, just play Odell Beckham, whatever.
Come on, just play Odell Beckham.
Okay, whatever. So we don't go crazy.
Though.
We don't go crazy here. We don't go crazy. Let's talk.
We do, but yeah.
Well, sure. I mean, have fun with it. Okay, this is a thorn in everyone's side this week, Gene, and I'm just giving you this question as a setup because I don't want you to have to sit there for too long and get bored. Damian Williams, like maybe next. I mean, what do we know, or do we know anything about? And here's the thing, right? Again, I'm kind of cold at this time of year, and I say some of these players. James Conner, Juju Smith-Schuster, Evan Ingram now is back on this list. Jordan Howard is probably on this list. Like, okay, a lot of these players, we're not going to trust them in the first week back anyway. Now we're in week 14. That means what? You're holding them for week 16, maybe, especially in short bench leagues. Like, I'm saying you're cutting him, right? I mean, is Damian Williams on that list? Like, is there anything to wait around for here?
The Kansas City offense. The fact that none of their running backs have been healthy for a stretch all year long. The fact that when he was in there, he was productive, albeit was kind of week 2, week 3. And rib injuries are painful and probably, they want him as healthy as possible with the way that LaShawn McCoy and Darrell Williams and Darwin Thompson, and now they're going to have Spencer Ware back, a known commodity. There's really no incentive to allow him to practice and play until he's fully recovered. And in the meantime, who knows what happens this week? I mean, they had
right. Matt Waldman, that's why I'm going to ask him. Matt,
yeah.
We're expecting you to know what's going to happen in the Kansas City backfield. Go ahead.
Exactly. Yeah. So, Darwin Thompson looked awful good down the stretch last week. So maybe there's not a role for Damian Williams if LaShawn McCoy and then Darwin Thompson are there. But, none of these backs have been able to stay healthy for a consistent period of time. And there's load management issues with all of them. So who knows what, if you knew that Damian Williams was going to get 20 touches in week 16, would you want him on your roster? Probably, right? So what other options, again, do you have out there? And there's a ton of them. We've seen it's been, do you want to roll the dice on Raheem Mostert? Well, now we got Matt Breida back and Tevin Coleman is still there. And all those guys are the
Exactly.
same. We just talked about Chris Carson and Rashad Penny. I mean, these are some of the decisions I've made with my teams on bye week. Which Benny Snell, Jalen Samuels,
Wait, did
which
you just
one
get
of
a
these
humble
guys?
brag about your teams having a bye for the playoffs?
No, because the rest of my teams are nowhere near the playoffs at all. So that's what I spent my week this week doing is who might I want on my roster to catch lightning in a bottle in week 15 and 16 rather than making the Robbie Anderson decision this week. That's the decision I'm going to have next week. So I'm trying to predict, do I want Paris Campbell on my roster? Do I want Kenny Stills on my roster? Should I try to go get John Ross, that sort of stuff? So Damian Williams is in that category. So I don't know that I would cut him. I guess the question for me then would be if Darwin Thompson was out there, you'd probably want him because he's healthier than Damian Williams,
the guy
right?
who's actually playing right now. Yeah.
But that decision is you're going to have the same decision next week. So what compels me about Damian Williams is we heard that there was likely some progress being made this week. Adam Teicher and others said that there was a chance that he could even be active this week back on Tuesday and that he didn't practice. And again, I don't know that is so much that he's not recovering as much as there are other options and there is zero reason to put him out there outside on the field on a practice day if he's not recovered yet when you've got other options and your team is playing well. So, but that calculus could entirely change in a couple of weeks. And this isn't Tennessee's offense that we're talking about, or something else like that where you don't really know what's going on. If Damian Williams is the man in week 16, we're going to be talking about he's a top 5 option and you want him in your lineup. So if you got room to hold him unless there's a clearly better option out there, because I think lots of stuff can change in that Kansas City backfield between now and then.
So Matt, for people who aren't as good at fantasy football as Gene and don't have a bye this week, I only got one bye this week, and I got a lot of teams that miss the playoffs too, of course, every year. Matt, is the answer Darwin Thompson? Is it Shady McCoy? Is it Spencer Ware? Is it just none of the above against New England this afternoon?
Probably the best answer that you can throw out there is LaShawn McCoy right now, because really, if you look at this backfield, it's kind of in two groups. You have the LaShawn McCoy or Damian Williams as the lead potential player. And if neither of them are playing well or available, then you might get the Darrell Williams group who basically Spencer Ware is now. So where does that put Darwin Thompson? He's in that Damian Williams, LaShawn McCoy group, which means I think Darwin Williams is kind of a red herring for everyone who's been excited about him all year and can't wait to use him. And they saw what he did, in cleanup duty against the Raiders. So really what this plays out to be is, yes, you grab Damian Williams for week 16 as a possibility. You use LaShawn McCoy right now. And then if either, McCoy gets hurt and Williams and Williams is in there basically because they need to drag a body in there, then it heightens the chances for Spencer Ware to be pretty darn good. Down the stretch. I think you add Spencer Ware before you add Darwin Thompson. I think and I know a lot of people will disagree with that point, but I think that's really the way it is, because they have enough people that they didn't need to add Spencer Ware.
I agree.
So why would they do that? Because Spencer Ware, they know what he can do. You talked about it Thursday. He can block, he can catch. He's played on this team before. He was their lead back before. He must be healthy enough. That's why he didn't want to take the injury settlement and where he took an injury settlement with the Colts rather than going to IR, because he wanted to play this year and he knew that he'd be able to. So, now it's convenient. And I think that as good as Darwin Thompson is going to be at some point, I think Andy Reid just doesn't quite trust him enough in pass protection and probably doesn't like what he sees on film to the extent that he thinks Darwin Thompson can be, that they, because Thompson's playing a little too frenetically. He's still getting yards and looking good, but he's playing a little frenetically. And I think that maybe he looks at this as an opportunity to get a veteran experience back heading into the playoffs who he would rather have and know he can trust if these things go haywire, where McCoy fumbles yet another time, or Damian Williams, has another injury, and it's just like, it seems like 2 weeks you have the same back, and then they rotate every 2 weeks due to some crazy thing happening.
Yeah, I agree with you. When I saw Spencer Ware added, I was disappointed because I thought we were going to get some Darwin Thompson run.
Yeah, me too.
But I could see a scenario where Ware's the most valuable back, even this week. Even when the dust settles and we look at the box score this week, Ware's the most valuable Kansas City
It's
back.
all about me this week. Spencer Ware.
It is. We're Cedric Pierman. Is Cedric Pierman going to get signed?
If he comes back, then it's definitely.
Shut it down.
I need to play the lottery.
Shut it down. Gene, let's touch on some things real briefly for folks. Any reason to hesitate plugging Austin Hooper in your lineup today?
Well, I don't think so. I don't think we've ever seen this before where a player did not practice for 3 consecutive weeks with an injury and then was not listed on the practice report at all the following week. And some of that probably had to do with the fact that they played Thursday last week. But no, I think that tells you that he's fully recovered, just that he may even be able to play last week if they didn't play Thursday, similar to Julio Jones. And then hopefully his conditioning is good. And there's, Jaden Graham has played well, but Hooper has been a very important part of that offense this year. I would fully trust him.
Did you see, by the way, that they fined the Lions like $75,000 for the way they handled the Matt Patricia thing? I mean, the Matt Stafford thing. Yeah. If you were in charge of handing out the fines, Gene, would you hand out more fines than the league's been handing out? Would you come down with the iron fist?
No, I am not an iron fist.
You got a percentage of
Would you get fussy? Would you get fussy about the way?
Just asking me if I take kickbacks, Waldman.
That's like that Simpsons.
Well, I mean, some of these doctors we see portrayed on TV, in these NFL, in these football.
You're trying to get me to admit to a Stark Law violation,
right?
On
exactly.
YouTube?
Yeah. Well, no. For?
It reminds me of the greatest Simpsons.
Of course not. I may or may not have accepted a donut from a patient this week. I think it's under $10. I'm probably
that's Ohio, not Massachusetts.
That's the peerless integrity of Dr. Gene that he even admits to getting the donut. It reminds me of there is a greatest Simpsons episode ever. Last exit to Springfield.
Was it Krispy Kreme?
It's the one whenever Homer becomes the union boss and they ask, he says, "What does the job pay?" Because he's the boss of the union. They say nothing. He goes, "Oh," he says, "Unless you're crooked." He goes, "Woohoo!" All right. Any hesitation playing Marlon Mack medically, because it is Tampa? That's a hesitation. That's a big hesitation. But for his hand this week, Gene.
No, I think what I took away from the local media reports is that both Frank Reich and Marlon Mack were very comfortable and confident in his ability to return and do everything that he needed to do. Again, nothing is a guarantee, but it certainly seems like they're going to trust him in nearly the same role he did before. And I think this is going to be not quite the Dalvin Cook situation, but similar to if Marlon Mack back at game speed in contact during the first couple of series feels fine, then that's it. He's going to get everything he got before his injury. If there's any concern, maybe they bring him back a little bit more slowly. But I think the anticipation is we're going to see how you feel in the first couple of weeks. And if all is well, then you get your 20 touches and we move on from there.
I should do this because I forget to do this. And Diego helps remind me. Hit the like button on the way out. YouTube likes that. Cecil would put some sort of speech here about our YouTube overlords.
Nice drum kit, Diego.
And yeah. Oh, really? I didn't even see that. What's he say? Drum kit in there? Wow. A drummer. Oh, nice. Give the drummer some. And Bama Bilo says 343 watching, only 30 likes. So, if you like it, if you like what we're doing. Matt, are people going to like starting Zach Pascal today against Tampa?
I mean, they won't hate it. I don't know if they're going to like it, but I think they won't hate it. So if you're stuck with like Kenny Stills decisions, you might go with Zach Pascal, and go for the kind of the warm, creamy center as opposed to
right.
Something that might be a little more spicy.
Gene, should we care at all about Jamal Williams being on the injury report when we're weighing our Green Bay running back decisions?
I don't think so. We know that Jamal Williams has a little bit of a bulky knee. We've seen it off and on over the past few years because he's been used a little bit more. I think we see a little bit more maintenance from him, but it's clear that the Packers want to give both of those backs enough touches to keep them hopefully healthy and productive at the same time. I don't have much concern for him.
Matt, should Patrick Peterson dissuade you from playing James Washington today?
No, because I don't think he's going to follow one player around in this offense on that level. And really, if they're going to throw to James Washington, if they're going to throw to him and it's going to be a route, it's going to be a route where he's going to be where he's supposed to be, which is basically a straight line route. He has good of a chance as Patrick Peterson. That's where he's he's already a near elite player as a pass catcher.
Yes.
He's just basically a near free agent as a route runner. And that's probably part of the problem and why he hasn't been on the field as much at this point, is that he only runs vertical routes well. And he has to get better at getting route depth. So don't blame Roethlisberger on this one. As much as we, 2 out of 3 of us would like to find a reason to blame Ben Roethlisberger on the show for anything.
3 out of 3. Come on.
Oh yeah. Okay, good. There we go. So then, but I think in this case, there's a reason why he didn't start the season as a bigger contributor.
And I'm glad that we have the hunting buddy addition to Narrative Street now. Duck and James Washington are hunting buddies.
Right there. He's right there.
There's the duck. Nice. Oh, I like that. Yeah. And Matt, I saw you wrote about this too. It makes me really happy whenever you write about something in the top 10 that I also saw and thought was really noteworthy. James Washington's ball tracking on those 2 deep balls last week was as good. Like, if you were like, this is what ball tracking is. My Lord. He was hypnotized by the ball. Denzel Ward was holding one of his arms and he still just grabbed it over the shoulder and pinned it to his body. It was unbelievable. And it makes me think, of course, is the dog you take hunting with you that sees exactly where the duck fell, can run into the thicket and go straight to the spot. Yeah. Duck and James Washington have some
don't ask him to run in the middle of the field, because he might smell a scent that he gets interested in and stops and then wags his tail, and then you try and pull the leash and it won't move. Yeah, that's kind of.
I found something better than the duck. Thank you, folks. Everybody in the chat room. Congratulations if you're still alive. May you still be alive, or at the very least, may it enhance your enjoyment of this football Sunday. Big games. At the very least, you're going to enjoy Baltimore, Buffalo, and New Orleans, San Francisco early, and New England, Kansas City late. Mecole Hardman is the shot that blows up the Death Star. Come on, Andy Reid. Come on, Patrick Mahomes. Make it happen, baby. Make it happen. We got Seattle on the Rams tonight, and Philly and the Giants tomorrow night. NFC East fever. Catch it. Anyway.
Is there a shot against that?
Yeah, I was going to say a little penicillin.
That's probably what's been going around
then. East fever. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, of course, Matt Waldman, Dr. Gene, for giving us their valuable time and insight. Thank you, everybody, for giving us your enthusiasm and sharing this journey with us. And it's the most wonderful time of the year. It's fantasy football playoff time. It's a football time when there's a lot on the line for teams, which makes the game so much more enjoyable. And spending time with you makes our time more enjoyable. Thank you always, folks. And as always, stay classy.
Cleveland.